Also, you can easily, a lot of us kind of are, have different ways of accessing our collections. Some people have archival management systems. My collection is still pretty analog. We still work off of a lot of paper finding aids and lists. Because we are a public library. So we have a different system when it comes to evaluating our collection. So, but we can kind of tell what we're missing, especially from our named collections, because we do have collections donated by people that are named. And then we also have books. Some of our stuff as well is in the library system's card catalogs. So that may be another place to search to evaluate your collection. And like I said, this question, could any member of my community find information relevant to them in one visit? Is kind of this overall theme. It's something just to ask yourself while you're looking through your collections, looking through your databases, your digitized collections, and so on. So next, you should evaluate the demographics of your community. This is really easy to do. You can go to the Census Bureau and look at your demographics for your county. You just go to populations and people. It's on the left side of the menu. So you can just see which groups you have locally in your community first. But like I said, don't forget other groups like women, LGBTQ plus community members, and any other groups, Native American tribes, if you live next to a reservation, for example. Just try to think of everyone that you might be missing. One surprising thing that we find missing from our collection is information on the Vietnamese community because the Mississippi Gulf Coast does have a very big population of Vietnamese Americans. And we found that we just have a couple of newsreels. And that's a whole community that's still thriving and still participating in our community that is not represented in our archive. So some things may be surprising depending on, like I said, the demographics of your area. So you take stock, you review, and you ask yourself, is anyone left out? So how would this group do that? Would anyone just run a search in an archival management system or look at finding aids? I'd like to see in the chat box. I'm kind of curious. Like I said, in my collection, we would definitely just take a look through our finding aids. Oh, yeah, collection analysis for sure, Carrie. Yes, exactly. Hmm. Yes, us too, Jennifer. So us, because we do work with like a smaller collection, there's things that we access all the time and that we know, like right off the bat, like, yes, we're missing this. Yes, Sean. Yes, very good. Yes, we're going to talk about that in our planning stage about building a rapport with the community. Yes, excellent. So, yeah, these are great. A space. Yes. So some of the reasons our archives are missing these collections are that maybe the previous archivist and groups running the archive just did not have priority in collecting information from these communities. Another thing I've seen too is that these groups of communities could have a distrust in government-run institutions. So sometimes they've even, persecuted, ignored, they've failed them. So why would they want to put their history in an archive that they don't trust? Like they don't know what's going to happen to their things or if their history is just going to be forgotten in a back room, unprocessed somewhere. There's also cultural differences that cause archivists to be a little hesitant to reach out into these communities. Some communities are really tight knit, like family groups, so it might be a little intimidating to try to reach out. And there's also language barriers and things like that to consider as well, cultural differences. for sure. These are just some of the reasons. I'm sure there are many, many more, but these are just some of the big ones that I've seen in action with my experience. So here are some short-term goals, things you can do now to begin bridging these gaps. So there's some things you can hit the ground running and just start to kind of make an effort to reach out and to find a way to include these groups in your collection. One way is to make a quick reference research file. My collection does still have vertical files. I know that can be a little point of contention or can seem a little outdated, but a research like a reference file or a research file does help if someone comes in and at least gives you a broad topic. So you can photocopy relevant periodicals such as newspaper articles and I see in some of the chats coming up. Yeah, newspaper articles, magazine articles, pamphlets, brochures from that community. Sometimes one thing to do if you do know a collection does have some relevant information, you might put a note on top of the file, be like, see collection or in your computer system, which would be much more efficient, but we work with what we got, right? And we include lists of any collections in your facility in that file. So that is something that can be done like right away. If you use a newspaper database, it can be done really quickly. Like yeah, like luckily now we have things like uh newspapers.com or newsbank as well. Like if you can search some of the relevant events and topics for those communities is where I would go, and then I would photocopy. So yeah, and it's nice to have that quick reference for researchers. We do have a lot of other topics as well that are popular with our researchers that we just keep a quick file on that we get asked all the time. As you can imagine, Barks is a popular topic in the collection I work with, Barks root beer, for example, and other coast-related topics. But we do keep them as well for groups. And then also you can keep, like I said, just keep in mind where some of these items could be located if someone comes in to research. So number two, another thing you can do is you can reach out to other facilities, look at other similar facilities and institutions in your area, including state archives and universities, and then you can reference these patrons to those collections. So I do know, like I'm familiar with some of the bigger collections related to the Mississippi Gulf Coast in the McCain Library at Southern Miss, the Gulfport Historical Society, and at Mississippi Department of Archives and History. Does anyone ever do that? Do you ever recommend to your patrons to check somewhere else? Yeah, that's what I do too. I try to make sure that if they come to my facility and I feel like this is just, a good thing just to make everyone feel welcome, that I give them something to go with, at least some kind of lead that can help them further with their research. So then another thing that you can do is make a list of relevant websites and digital collections for those communities. You can keep it as a digital download or a handout. One thing we keep in our department that gets referenced all the time is a list of free websites for genealogy, but you could do that for relevant collections as well. But if you don't want to do the paper, you could certainly make a digital web link for it as well. And that kind of goes along with number two. So let's talk about the long term, and this is the hard part. So there is no quick fix to filling all the holes in your collection unless a miracle happened and someone just walked in one day and gave you everything you needed, like a magic like archive fairy or something came. So these are some things that you can start doing, but they are going to take time. They will be a process. They will be part of like a long-term plan, basically. So the first thing I would say is to begin building relationships with underrepresented groups. So you can plan programming focused on them. So for example, maybe a genealogy course with someone who speaks Spanish. if you want to get like try to help the language barrier. Another option would be to go to cultural events focused on that community and to do general community work at large. Like I said, my department does some pretty big events. We're going to be at the Biloxi Cultural and Historical Expo in May. We also participate in the cemetery tour, which is a huge event. There's usually over 1,000 people who come to the 2-day event. And that's where we meet a lot of our patrons, a lot of potential patrons. And there's also cultural events, like, for example, with some communities like Lunar New Year festivals, different groups sponsoring different community events. Set a table out. Another thing you could do is take your department brochure or your promotional materials and translate them into another language, like Vietnamese or Spanish, for example. And this is just the first step in beginning to get your name out there, to start building a relationship with people and the leaders of these different communities. You can also apply for grants to purchase relevant materials. So some things you might want to consider getting would be digital editions of newspapers relevant to that group, appropriate books, historical maps. It does depend on what your collection needs. I know in some instances you can buy you know, like photos, like vintage photos, which are it's kind of odd, but you can try to start bridging the gap, especially with books. Another resource you can do online are open source ebooks through Open Library or Google Books as well. Those can be used within your own, information for like web links and research files. So also you can partner with relevant organizations like groups such as the Invisible Histories Project and other groups out there that basically they're kind of like a crowdsourced sharing program where they can help each other develop collections, partner, build those relationships, and begin talking about these topics. Has everyone heard of the Invisible Histories Project? Mhm. Yeah, we're actually one of my location, my department is actually a member as well. They're great. I just think it's such a good example of beginning to form relationships with groups that have not been represented in the past. And I hope to see more things like this. So, in conclusion, building new relationships is the best way to obtain new collections. It is not going to be right, one festival is not going to make, going to bridge a long-term gap, but I think it is the beginning of learning about new groups, using existing resources to create websites, lists, quick research. So at least your patrons don't come in and leave with nothing. And also, another important thing, and this is for anyone who comes into an archive, create an environment that is welcoming to all. I find that our department sometimes is intimidating to different people because we're behind. We have our own doors. You come in, there's microfilm readers. Some people may not have even seen a microfilm reader before. There's a lot going on. Sometimes there's a lot of researchers in there. Sometimes there's not. Sometimes it's just like an empty room, and patrons are a little leery to start, and sometimes they're concerned about not knowing where to begin with genealogy, for example. So it's good just to greet and to be open to new patrons and what experience or little experience they may have with researching. So that is the majority of my content for today. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Does anyone have any comments or any recommendations of things they've done in their department to help bridge these community gaps and find and build relationships with different groups?
anyone would like to share their experience, they're welcome to use the mic.
Hmm. So if anyone's thinking about it, I will say some things, like I said, would be good that I hope for our department to do would be to definitely build some more relationships with certain groups. Oh, yes. Oh, that's a good question. So, okay, so for a long time, I did not have experience with an appointment-based system because we were always like open and people would come in, except I'm glad you asked me this, Melissa, except during COVID, because of us trying to limit the numbers, we did an appointment system, but it wasn't too strict. So if someone came in and wanted to use the collection and no one was in there or only one person was in there, we did it. The main problem for us was because we do have three patron computers patrons use for Ancestry, and they're really close together, and there wasn't a good way to separate them. So we were worried that if a bunch of people came to use the Ancestry computers at one time, COVID would spread. But I think it is better to have just open access to a reading room. And if you're lucky enough to have a facility where your collections can be kept in the back, it works the best. And you can, see what your patrons need, have some quick reference for them, and then you can get what they need from the archive room. So I think that's more open and more of an open experience. They can also come just because they're like in our like situation where they're just visiting the library.
I have a quick question.
Mhm.
Have you ever had an experience where, say, a minority community begins their own institutional type of either museum or archives, um, that then essentially becomes competition,
Mm.
and the first thought would be, okay, well, maybe collaborate, but what if that is not something that they particularly want to do? Have you been able to address any kind of situation like that? Do you just sort of let them do them?
That's a really good question. So, fortunately, in our community, we have not had that happen as of yet. We've not had like we've actually begun like we've created a couple partnerships with different groups. Like there's a group that does reunions for their school when the schools were segregated, and they've come and done receptions in our facility and partnered with us. So we don't have that, we have not had that kind of competition relationship. What I would say is just to keep reaching out every once in a while, and just know you're there, not try to like pin yourself as competition for them or try competition for collections because leadership just change. And I think views change as well as leadership changes in archives. So I would just keep reaching out and just that's what I would do if I was in that situation for sure.
Yeah, okay, thank
Like,
you.
yeah, just try to keep it like as like they're trying to keep their history. And like you said, you don't know what
Mm.
opportunities will come in the future. Because I've definitely seen things change uh with certain like mentalities, even like with the past 4 years when I've been back in my collection. So I'm gonna look through the chat. Um, Heather.
I see a
Mhm.
question in the chat box. What recommendations, suggestions would you offer to someone whose library is not interested in being inclusive, not inviting to its underrepresented or underprivileged community?
Oh, that's interesting. So, it depends. So it depends. What kind of library is it? Is it if it's a public library, that would be pretty difficult to have that 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 that's interesting. So I would recommend that would be a probably something you would have to talk to the leadership of your facility, like your library board of directors, your director, any like direct managers for that library, and try to find out maybe the root of why that is a part of your library's culture or your part of your library's mentality. And you'd have to go from there for sure. From that, you'd have to kind of find out the reason why. Is it a holdback? Is it a certain leader? Is it a certain part like antagonistic element? Is there a certain misconception about it that can be fixed or could be the light could be shed on it? And that's a really good question. Yeah, so that's kind of that one's making me think. Yeah, like I said, I would look into the policies of that library system. I would also, like I said, see where the root of that is. Also, there's a really good one about trying to get more minority related collections within to reach out into your groups. Like I said, think outside the box with this one, with Heather's question. Think about, are there alumni groups that you can reach out to? Are there, for like, say, for example, in Mississippi, when the schools were segregated, sometimes these school groups have made their own like alumni groups and their own reunions. You could reach out to the leadership that way. Think about community festivals and also think about just things that you could purchase, like from like book reference sources and things like that.
I would just
Hmm.
include Heather's question if it's okay. She
Hmm.
said, I work at a university that really wasn't diverse until the late 1950s, and our town was unfortunately a sundown town, so that this adds a layer of difficulty when trying to reach out to underrepresented groups. Could you go into a little more detail on how you would tackle trying to get more minority related collections within our collections? So let's see.
Alumni involved donating materials. That is, my window's really small, so apologize. That takes me a moment to scan.
Me too.
So that's why I'm reading everyone carefully. So AG Hill, so she is asking about women's athletic groups and getting alumni involved in donating materials. I would maybe recommend a newsletter or adding a section about the archives to your alumni newsletter or creating one. One group that I'm a part of, the alumni group does an like message from the archivist every month or every issue, and so they might feature an item from the collection or do a little brief little snippet of history about the organization. For example, this is a women's organization, but I would see if you could reach out to some kind of promotion within the alumni groups, like a newsletter, a section on their website. For example, since I don't know your institution, I don't know the specifics, but that's what I would recommend.
And I think we have someone that would like to also comment. Vic, if you would like.
Hmm.
Hey y'all, how's everybody doing?
Hi, Vic.
I was typing and I felt like I was putting a lot of typos and not being super clear. So I just wanted to chime in and say I think unfortunately, especially, and this is speaking from like the perspective of higher ed, but I think it also would apply to other institutions as well. I think a lot of times for a lot of communities, especially minority communities, there's not always a good reason to trust the intentions of an archive when reaching out. And just
Hmm.
because, like, you in this position are truly doing this with the best of intentions and with a goal to preserve the history of that community, like, you can't guarantee that your institution will be supportive for the long term. And in a lot of cases, like, that history has been is currently being actively attacked, and you can't promise that those stories, that those documents will be forever preserved. And I think a lot of communities feel like there's just so little, and to give that up without the guarantee of like that trust and that perpetuity and that safety is a really big deal. And unfortunately, we will not always be successful in that, and it will sometimes take years in order to sort of build that trust and relationship, especially if you're working at a place that has historically not been welcoming to minority communities. So I just wanted to kind of give my 2 cents in because I think about that a lot. Like, my initial intention is always like, I want to like have the material so that it can be shared and saved and preserved, but also acknowledging that sometimes you do have to like leave that up to the owners of those materials and risk potentially never having it or never and actually losing it. And while that sucks, like from an archivist perspective, I think it's one of those cases where we have to put like real people before the archive.
I
Um,
agree. Yes. That's what I said with the community building. It's not going to happen overnight. It's just not like a quick fix for anything. Another happy median would be to offer digital scanning and give the materials back or do them digital scanning like with the people there so
yeah,
they can watch you handle their items and hand them right back.
that's amazing. And then I've seen other places do this before and sort of like giving them the tools, like teaching like how to do the preservation themselves so that at least it'll last. And then maybe, 10, 20 years, 5 years down the line, then it's something that you can do between everything else. But yeah, I just wanted to add my 2 cents. I love your presentation. I love your PowerPoint. It's really cute.
Uh, Thank you, Vic. Thank you for chiming in. That's such a good point, and I'm glad to have you like reemphasize what I'm like trying to communicate in like 20 minutes. I appreciate it so much. You have a good day. So these are some really great suggestions about for alumni participation, like oral histories, reaching out, email. Uh, yeah, these are really good ones. Another way to kind of bring your facility kind of to the community is also if you wanted to maybe do a Facebook Live or a video where you do like a backroom tour of your facility and kind of demystify what your archive room is like or what happens to people's materials. So it's not like their materials are just going into, a big black, room where no one sees them again. So these are some really good comments. I'm just catching up with the comments. I was listening to Vic. hmm So excellent. hmm So these are all really good comments. Does anyone have any other questions? I do recommend everyone read some of the comments. There are some great suggestions. If there is no more questions, I left my email here. This is my Gmail. I think it works better than my school email and my work email. I'm sure everyone knows how that goes. I am happy to talk further about this project. And if I don't catch some of the other presenters, I do look forward to seeing their presentations on YouTube as well. And I appreciate the SMA for letting me come and speak to you today. And I appreciate everyone for coming this morning and talking with me and sharing your thoughts and being such a great group to chat today.
Yes, thank you so much, Mandy. We really appreciate it. If there aren't any other questions, we're going to break now for our lunch. We will reconvene at 12:30 for our next presentation by Rory Holford, who will talk about reorienting perceptions of racism, a case study on the Equal Justice Institute's Legacy Museum. And again, that will be at 12:30 Central Time. So everyone have a great lunch. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mona. Y'all have a good day.